Hi, Andie. Welcome, folks. We are so excited to have you joining us today. I am thrilled to have my friend and former colleague, Andie, joining us for our conversation about how we can create more inclusive spaces. The two of us work together in healthcare, and this was a topic we talked a lot about then, and it's a topic that's top of mind for me now. Andie, before I tell you why I've been thinking a lot more about this recently, welcome. Thrilled to
Thank
have
you.
you here. Folks who are watching us live and later, please drop in the comments wherever you are. We'd love to know where people are watching from, either live or when we see the video. We'll be monitoring the chat. We are using Restream to stream this on 3 different platforms. So we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So on any of those platforms, you can use the chat to connect with us. There is about a 20-second delay. Please be mindful of that. And we'd love to um, call you out as you put information in chat. And Amanda, so excited to see you. Yay, the former healthcare folks together. So excited to see you as well. Welcome, welcome. Andie, tell us a few things about yourself and what you're doing now. Introduce yourself to the group and then we can get started.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Shake, for having me. Shake and I definitely used to have lots and lots of conversations around, I think, inclusivity and really how we could fix the universe. So I'm so excited to be I'm so excited to be here. I'm Andie Herbert. I am a leadership development and organizational development coach. And these days, I am trying to help individuals figure out how to live their happiest versions of themselves. And along with that, helping corporations figure out how to make the workplace kind again. And so it's interesting when we talk about kind. Kind for us is kindness, inclusivity, nurturing in dynamic work cultures. And so I think it's such a good opportunity to be here to kind of talk about how we can have good dialogue and make our spaces more inclusive.
Great. So excited to have you here. And Lucretia, welcome from Northern California. Thrilled to have you joining us as well. So, Andy, as you know, inclusivity has been part of my DNA for a long time. I'm an immigrant in the US, so I've been in this outsider coming in, and in different times in my life, parts of my life, I felt that outsider insider dynamic. So for a long time, I've thought about how do you create inclusive spaces? I read about this. I talk about this with a lot of people, personally, professionally. And during the holidays, I actually had a really interesting experience. I am now part of a gym that has locations in Northern California and Southern California. I was with my parents in Southern California and decided, oh, there is a Zumba class. I'm going to go to the Zumba class closer to their house. I went, there were about 50 people in that room, and I was in the back. Being a guest, and I did the Zumba class. The instructor was amazing and lots of fun. And at the end, as I was changing my shoes in the studio, she came up to me and introduced herself to me. And she said her name, and she's like, I've never seen you here before. Is this the first time you're taking Zumba? When did you join our gym? And I felt so seen. I felt so welcomed. She was like, I hope you'll come back the next time you're in town. And it's amazing. My own gym, other instructors haven't done that, right? I
Mhm.
go regularly and I've started making connections, but that's not happening to the level I was new. There were 50 people in this room, and she went to all of the people who were there for the first time and she welcomed them and introduced herself personally. And I thought about how much effort it took from her, not a ton, but more of her time at the end, but how incredible it made me feel personally. And you bet the next time I'm in town, I'm going to look for her specific class and show up to that class. And
Yeah.
I thought about, we often talk about inclusion and belonging and think of it from big, grand gestures, right? We're thinking it has to be something ginormous, welcome sign like in neon lights. It's not that, it's the one-on-one connection and the
Oh
acknowledgement.
gosh.
So that's how I define inclusion and helping to
Yeah.
create inclusive spaces. How do you define inclusion? I'd love to know if in your mind it's similar to or different from belonging.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think they're a little bit different. So for me, inclusion is really, it really has to do with mentality, right? So how do we open up ourselves to include folks that both agree with us and maybe the people who don't agree with us? How do we create and I always think of a lot of things from the workplace, so forgive that part of it, but it really is this idea that we live in a whole community, and within that community everybody isn't going to look like us, be from the same background as us, be from the same political association with us, think the way that we think, eat the food that we eat. It's just not going to happen. And so the inclusion part is, how do we just say, okay, it's okay that you don't agree or don't think or don't act or don't behave like me. So to me, that's really what inclusivity is. It is opening your mind. It is being, what I'll say, like an open heart to just understanding that other people exist in the world and that we are all part of one community. In terms of belonging, I think belonging is a little bit different, because I think belonging is where you find maybe more of your safer space, right? It's where you can be as vulnerable as you'd like to be and still know that you're safe. Know that you can share things and you can provide even your own opinion and perspective on things and still know it's a safe space. I think of belonging more in that sense, where you just know you're psychologically safe, you can have psychological bravery, and it includes inclusivity, but it just takes it one step further.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate your call out of the differences, and how inclusivity is about us understanding and embracing the world around us, right? And the unique things that makes us human, and the unique aspects of living in a society where we think differently. I think it's so beautiful. I'm so curious about humanity in general, and it's so
Yeah.
beautiful that we're all different. My child is different than I am. He's similar in a lot of ways, but there are key differences too, right? And
Mhm.
understanding and trying to meet that person where they are versus where I need them
Exactly.
to be. Uh,
Exactly.
I just want to say thank you again to those who are watching live. We'd love to know where you're watching from, or any questions or comments you might have. I'm sure Andie and I can chat with ourselves and with our questions, my questions and comments for a while, but we're also welcoming any comments and questions from the audience as well. Um, so I was wondering, Andie, if you can share an example of a company that exemplifies an inclusive culture in your mind, or maybe if you don't want to name them by name, give a profile of one.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the work that I've done, I think that you'll always find pockets of these things happening, right? And I know a great company that is actually all female, um, or mostly female. Um, and I think the idea of I think what they demonstrate and what they show on a very frequent basis is just this idea around cognitive diversity. Loving the ideas of different thoughts, loving the ideas of having conversations where there can be dissonance in those conversations, where at the end of the day, these conversations are about learning, not necessarily about proving anyone's point or saying who's right or saying who's wrong. And what I see from those organizations, quite honestly, is um, they're much more innovative. There's this freedom to be creative, right? Because we're not going to be judged against, again, our ideas or our thoughts or our backgrounds or our perspectives. Um, and I think that there's something very freeing about that. I think when you I was actually just having a conversation with someone yesterday about this, that there was at some point in our history, we decided to stop having conversations that we called them uncomfortable conversations, or we stopped having those. We started to say, oh, let's not talk about these things because they create a level of discomfort for us. And by doing that, it wasn't that we all came together and then just had conversations about the stuff we wanted to talk about, because on a side thing, we can never show up as parts of ourselves. We show up as our whole self, right? um we just went into our collective corners. So now we won't get together with someone who, maybe thinks the world is flat for the world being round. We don't think we should have those conversations. We want to be in an argument. We want to make sure that you understand. Oh, you don't get it. You're what is the thing that people say? Let's agree to disagree. It's like, we're not there being curious to understand where people are coming from, and have those types of conversations. So when I this organization that I was talking about, what's really great is there's always great dissonance in the conversations, but at the end of the day, again, I use the term psychological bravery before. There's the bravery to come and give your perspective and give your opinion and your point of view, without the fear of being ostracized out of the group. And that just makes the whole work environment, ironically, because I think some would think if we just sort of open it up to having dialogue, it's going to make the work environment uncomfortable. But because that safe space has been, the foundation has been set around it being a safe space, um, they're able to have these difficult conversations that then manifest and turn things into, really great innovation for them.
I love that. And it's interesting thinking about safe spaces. I recently was in a conversation where I'm leading a cohort of individuals, and they're executive leaders in organizations. And somebody said their organization has shifted from using safe space to brave space, to
Yeah,
say that you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to be curious about somebody else. Being curious is act of bravery, right? You're willing to
that's right.
challenge yourself. And I really appreciated that. So I've tried to think about it safe and brave space, right? Like, how do we create both? And how do we
Well,
position it in conversations?
I think you have to have the baseline of safety first, right? We have to know that if I come to have a conversation with you, I have to already know that you're not going to judge me. I have to already know that this is an environment that I can speak my mind. So that safety has to come first. But to your point, if no one engages in that safe space, which is the bravery part, we really will struggle to get anywhere, because you do have to be the person willing to stand up. You just have to know that when you stand up, you're not going to get shot. So I think the safety has to come first for people to be brave enough to kind of um, make the statement. And I think we've all probably been in this situation. I know certainly in my younger career, being in a meeting and knowing that what they were talking about wasn't right, but the environment was not set up safely for me to be able to say something, because what my title was, what my age was, whatever my gender was, whatever the confines for that culture. um but I think we've all been there. I think if it's a safe space, you're willing, you become more willing to be open.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome to Maya from San Francisco. You asked the question, can you introduce your role in your respective career? So, Andie, I'll let you go first, and then I'm happy to do as well.
Yeah, so I own my own coaching and consulting firm. And so my role is really to help organizations and individuals find their kind of space, working to understand what their own personal needs are and where they need to be. And then as a collective, how we make that work for an entire community being the organization.
Great. Thank you. And I'm Shake Salikian. I have spent the last about 25 years in the nonprofit sector, the last three adjacent and serving the nonprofit sector through different aspects. I've had senior leadership positions, obviously. To be a senior leader, I've worked my way up to those positions in higher ed and academic medicine and healthcare, as well as social service organizations. So, the one thing about me, Andie, and maybe this is just the again that DNA that I was talking about. I remember being 5 years old and calling people out for littering on the street. So I've always been like, no, that's not right. I'm going to say something. Um, I have been that felt like I'm that champion, and I need to be the champion for the voices that aren't being heard. So well, I'm sure I've made some faux pas in my career because I have stepped out of line because in places where the expectation was you're here to be seen and listen, not to speak. But, it's an interesting calculation that we have to make in our minds. Can you give me some specific examples of how some of us can create an inclusive and curious space in our workspaces and in our lives today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head with the word curious. I think we have to take every opportunity to really start with a curious mind. Um, and that can show up in a series of ways. I think emotional intelligence is probably the key thing, and it's not just about um, perceiving what other people might be going through, but also where you are at as well. And so, for example, if I know I've gotten in a fight with my partner, I have to recognize where my headspace is at when I enter into work, and recognize that maybe my energy is not where it's at, maybe, so that I don't start to take things as people are communicating with me, take them with my own lens, my frustration lens, or whatever that is. So I think that's the first thing, is really around emotional intelligence and understanding where people are at, but really more importantly, understanding where you're at. We talked about curiosity a little bit. I think curiosity can also show up in when you're having dialogues with people. You are actively listening, so we're not listening to respond. Maybe sometimes, a tool that I will say is actually don't respond. Listen and paraphrase back what you heard, and maybe follow that up with a question. Now, when I say follow it up with a question, if we followed it up with a question or a question, it's very different from an inquisitive question, a real place of authenticity of trying to understand and learn. Um, I think that can be really helpful. Um, and honestly, this one's going to be a rough one. We're just not always going to agree. There are multiple angles and sides of things, and I know that there's a lot of things that we can feel very steadfast and hard on. And the reality is, people are coming from so many different perspectives. People have so many different life experiences that sometimes bring them to a certain conclusion that you're just not going to change, and it's okay. It really truly is. I know people are going to say no, but it's not okay to be this. It's like but it is. It just is. I know it's an odd thing to kind of feel. I think when we can let go of um, the idea that our perspective is the only one, it actually frees yourself up. You start to realize that it's like feel and think the way you need to believe. Like do what you need to do. Now that doesn't mean that you have to um, be a doormat for people. It doesn't mean that people get to poo poo on your own ideas. It doesn't mean that your stuff isn't valid. It just
Mhm.
means it's not the same. And that has to be okay too.
Yeah. It's I love the listening to for understanding, right? Not agreement. Just because you understand somebody and you can paraphrase, did I hear what I'm hearing is this, doesn't mean you agree and you've changed, you've left everything that you believed behind and now you're 100% aligned, right? And I think for a lot of people, including people in my life, we've had these conversations around the mirroring back does not mean you agree. It's I
That's it.
hear you saying this, right? And I don't know where we got this notion that we have to agree with everybody and be on the same page with everybody. I just can't
I
figure
feel
that
like
out.
there was a leader at some point who maybe said you're with us or against us, and I'm like, well, that's not a real thing. Like maybe there's some maybe in some situations, but it's sort of become our culture, right? I mean, and not to bring up like cancel culture and all of that because that I think that's an interesting topic for itself, but it's like we've decided that if you're not on my side, you don't get to exist. You do not get to participate in the world anymore because you're not thinking the way I think. Now, I
Mhm.
want to be clear. This, you know, people's rights, people's abilities to live, those are off the table always, right? Because even if I don't agree with where your position is, fine. I just don't have to. I don't have to engage with you in that way. Um, so I'm always cautious because I'm not, rights are never on the table. Rights are always, are always the baseline, but people don't have to agree with your position. People don't have to agree with your stuff. And actually what's interesting, Shake, is I feel like the people who don't agree with me that I can sit down and have open conversations with, I at least start to build a bridge to understanding where they're coming from, how they came to this conclusion. And for me, if we really want to solve, you know, massive conflicts and challenges, that is key. I have to understand what is driving your decision. I can't get there if we can't chat. I can't get there if I'm not listening and paying attention to the things that are emotionally triggering for you that's drawing you to this conclusion. We have to sort of be in a space to be a bit open, and that's not
Mhm.
easy. That's not easy, but to be a bit open to try and understand, to get to the to sometimes get to the conclusion we want, which I think is not necessarily convincing someone of your side, but at least a place where we can gather and have good dialogue.
Yeah. I'm curious. Are there strategies that you would recommend for folks when you are triggered? And it's interesting. Recently, I have a 13-year-old son who's a seventh grader, and he came to me and we were talking, and he goes, "That triggers me, and I'm having this reaction. I think we need to stop this conversation right now and pick it up later." I don't know if I would have done that at 13, right? I'm not 100% sure I had that emotional maturity. So I am excited that at school they're learning those types of strategies. Later, when we talked, I learned. Um, do you feel like that's a strategy or any other strategy or recommendations you have for folks when there are those heated moments where you're like, I am not listening. The inner dialogue has gotten so loud that I
Ah,
cannot hear anything that's really happening here. How to respectfully say to the other person that I need to take a break, etc., and not have it shut down the conversation and the long-term dialogue and topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to shut down the conversation. And sometimes I think it's important to understand the goal. When you decide to engage in, what are you hoping to get? Are you really trying to change a mind? Are you really trying to just get your point across? Are you trying to learn? What is your end goal? Your end goal will dictate sort of how you then approach the situation. So if you get triggered, it's okay to say, I was hoping to learn today, and I don't think we're going to get there today, right? I would love to pick this back up in a week or later on this afternoon. And I say
Mhm.
this with relationships, right? You don't have to stay in an argument. There's no if all the energy is so tight and up, the other person isn't
Mhm.
hearing you, you're not hearing the other person, again, you're never going to get to that goal. It's okay to take a beat. They love to talk about that in acting class, like take that beat, take that breath,
Yes.
because sometimes when you can go and honestly taking that small moment, you honestly can get to reflect and see where probably you have said or done some things that escalated a thing, or quite frankly, you where um, understanding what they're saying and why that's triggered you, right? Because at the end of the day, I say this a lot. We don't get to control how other people feel and think and believe. We just
Yeah.
don't. And so we cause more stress on ourselves in thinking that we might get to do that. And so um, I think it's important to self care always, extricate yourself from the situation. And it doesn't, as you said, it doesn't have to be rude. It is, I don't think we're getting anywhere. Um, or, or a good option too is to just ask a question.
Mm.
Try and stay in the curious state. Try, and it's okay to say, let's just bring this down a second. I want to try to understand you. We're at fever pitch right now. We need to bring it down because I really want to try and understand you. So, questions are great, great ways to kind of
Yeah.
diffuse the situation a little bit. Take that beat, ask that question, and try and get back to into the learning mode.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for joining us as our time is coming to a close. It's crazy. I wish we had 2 hours for this conversation. Any final questions, please put them in the chat. One thing that I did want to mention to Andie, I think we've gone away from, and I'm guilty of this. I have my headphones in quite a lot, listening to books, etc., while running errands. Um, from engaging with other people. I joked with my husband the other day that on an airplane, when I sit down and I'm not traveling with my son and husband, I tend to be the middle seat, but sit next to other people and they come in and they have this closed thing. I want to raise my hand to the flight attendant and like, can I be reassigned? I want to be in the chatting section. I've had such amazing conversations with people in random spaces, right? Like just the smile and hi, tell me, I love coming, tell me about yourself. Tell me, and they get to decide what they share or what they don't
That's
share.
it.
And it can be such an interesting space to learn about different people, different walks of life. I mean, airports are amazing.
Oh
Although
gosh.
you have to be careful. Some people get very concerned as to why a stranger is talking to them.
Which I think says a lot as well, right? I mean, when we started this, we sort of were talking about community, and that's I continue to drive this message. Like we are not actually individuals. We currently live in an individualistic society, but it's stressful to human beings. Human beings are communal. We have been community for thousands of years. It's only in recent time that it's like you live away from your family, you live in a house where you don't know your neighbors. That's a relatively in terms of human existence, that's a relatively new thing. And so it is odd to sit next to someone that your knees are touching and you don't ever make eye contact and say hello. You know, I get it. Sometimes you got the chatty Cathys who you're like, it's my time. I just want to watch my little movie and like chill out. But like, so this is where it takes emotional intelligence too, right? Because it's emotional intelligence on both parts. Let's do our greetings and then let's see where we're at. Maybe I don't want to have a 4 hour long conversation with you. Maybe I do want to just do a greeting, get to know you, and then go on about my business, right? So I think we do have to have a little bit of emotional intelligence in that, but it's shameful, shameful. I worked at a hospital in Orange County, and every day I would have to walk like through this hallway, and we were working on culture there, and it was about keeping your head up, making eye contact, and smiling as just the baseline, like what we learned in kindergarten. And past this doctor every day, and I would say, hello, good morning, pass me, pass me, pass me. One day he must have like heard my voice. It kind of shook him. Probably about a month, I got a good morning back, and I was like, yes, I won because we should be engaging with each other. It doesn't have to be long and big and hard, but we should be eye contacting and checking in with people and greeting people and holding doors for people. It's part of human nature for us to be communal in that way.
I was recently at a networking event and I was telling people that I know all the night employees at my local grocery store because I prefer to go in the evening when there isn't a lot of people. And like, how is your son? How did his game go? And like, how do you know those things? I stop and I talk to them. I say, thank you
That's
for,
right.
I'm short. A lot of them have to help me get things off shelves. I say thank you. I notice if they're wearing a button that says service excellence award winner, right? And I ask about that. Like, but I am the chatty Cathy I try to be like not a detective and asking million questions, right? Like there is that fine line.
It is, but I think it's I would err on that side more of like there has to be some of us who will just move to engage in that way, right? Who are trying to move the needle forward, who understand that we are more connected than we are separate. And it starts with small things like that. Let's just say hello.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. I can't believe our time is up. Andie, I'm so appreciative of your willingness to have this conversation to talk about being kind, being inclusive, creating spaces for conversation and curiosity. In our lives, not just in the workspace, not just in the personal space. Those don't have to be relegated to one or the other. It's the
That's right.
community space, right? And
That's right.
the humanity of being somebody who lives on this planet along with billions of other people, right? Thanks to everybody who joined us live, and thanks to those of you who watch. I know a few folks said they had conflicts, but they plan on watching the video. Comment. We'll keep track of the comments. Share some of your own recommendations for creating inclusive spaces or things you've seen and learned. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, Andie, for your time today.
Absolutely. Let's do it again soon.
I would love that. Thanks.